Come here, my boy. Sit closer. The fire is warm, isn't it? You like the way it crackles. It sounds like the snow under our boots long ago. You've asked me before about those days, about the scars on my hands, about why I stare so long into the fire when winter comes. Maybe tonight, you're old enough to hear it. I was not much older than you when the sky over Leningrad turned red. The year was 1941, and the world around me collapsed into a storm of steel and ice. I remember the sound of sirens, the trembling of the ground, the smell of smoke mixed with cold air so sharp it cut through our lungs. When the bombs stopped falling, the silence that followed was worse. A heavy, endless quiet, the kind that makes your heart ache. The city was broken, our homes shattered, the streets covered in ash and frost. Winter came early that year, as if even nature wanted to finish what the war had started. We burned whatever we could find: books, furniture, old toys, anything to keep a spark alive. At night, the firelight flickered across our faces, showing us we were still alive. My mother used to whisper stories of spring. She said the cherry trees would bloom again. I didn't believe her. The world was gray, frozen, and cruel. But even in that darkness, there were small lights. A neighbor knocking softly at the door with half a loaf of bread. A soldier sharing his ration with a child. Hope was not something we spoke about. It was something we passed hand to hand, like a candle, too fragile to breathe on. I learned what hunger truly meant, not just in the stomach, but in the soul, the hunger for warmth, for laughter, for the sound of life. And yet, somehow, we endured. Because, in Leningrad, even when everything froze, our hearts did not. There was a man who lived down our street. We never knew his name. One morning, as snow fell in lazy spirals, he came outside carrying a violin. His fingers trembled, his face thin as a shadow. But when he began to play, everything stopped. The melody rose through the cold air, soft, fragile, defiant. Even the soldiers paused. For those few minutes, the sound of war faded, and all that remained was beauty. That was the moment I understood. Art is resistance. When you have nothing left, you still have your song. I remember watching my father that winter. His hands were cracked and bleeding from shoveling snow and clearing debris for rations. He never complained. Every night he'd come home, sit by the dying fire, and say, "We endure, because that's what Russians do." He taught me how to walk across the frozen Neva River to fetch water. The ice groaned under our feet deep, hollow, alive. Every step was a conversation with death. But we walked anyway, carrying buckets heavier than we were. One night, the moonlight made the ice glow blue. I looked down and saw the river flowing beneath the frozen surface, dark, unstoppable, and I thought, maybe that's us, on the surface, frozen. But underneath, still moving, still alive. People disappeared quietly in those months. Neighbors, friends, teachers. We stopped asking where they went. Silence became our prayer, survival, our faith. But the violinist, he kept playing. Through the hunger, the cold, the bombs. And even now, when the wind howls outside this cabin, I swear I can still hear that song. Then, one morning, everything changed. We woke to a sound we hadn't heard in nearly 2 years. Trucks. Not enemy ones, but ours. They came across the frozen Lake Ladoga, the road of life, bringing bread, medicine, and hope. I can still see it clearly. People running into the streets, crying, laughing, hugging strangers. The soldiers were crying too. They had seen so much death that they forgot what joy looked like. That day, the gray sky began to open, and for the first time in forever, I felt the sun. I remember holding my mother's hand, both of us shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper disbelief that the world could still be kind. The air smelled of burnt wood and snow, but somewhere beneath that, it smelled like spring. We were thin, tired, broken, but alive. My father said something I never forgot. Now the real work begins. To live again. Years later, I walked along the Neva in early spring. The ice was melting, carrying away the ashes of what we had lost. A single bird sang from a rooftop. I stopped and listened. It wasn't a song of joy, exactly more like remembrance, but it was enough. Enough to know that life had returned. And when I saw the first flower pushing through the thawing ground, I remembered my mother's words. The cherry trees will bloom again. Now, my boy, I am an old man. The winters no longer frighten me. The cold outside is nothing compared to the cold we once carried within. Every time snow falls, I see their faces, my father, my mother, the neighbors who shared their last crumbs, the man with the violin. They are part of the snow now, part of the city's memory. People say time heals all wounds, but that's not true. Some wounds don't close, they turn into roots. Deep inside, they grow into strength. I tell you this story not to fill you with sorrow, but to remind you of what you're made of. You are the grandson of survivors. You carry their fire in your blood. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that violin again. I see the frozen river beneath my feet. I feel the trembling of the earth when the first trucks arrived. And then I open my eyes and see you alive. Free. Full of questions. That's how I know we won. Even when it felt like we lost everything. Because we endured. Because love, even buried under snow, does not die. So when the world feels cold to you, when darkness comes, and you think you can't go on, remember our story. Remember that even the longest winter ends. And when you see the first snow of the year, don't hide from it. Step outside, breathe it in, and listen carefully. You might just hear the faint sound of a violin, carried by the wind. Because the winter never ended, it simply learned to sing.